The mare stood in his corral like a ghost made flesh, her coat silver in the pre-dawn darkness. Samuel Hayes had heard the hoofbeats an hour before sunrise, slow and deliberate, like a funeral march across his land. When he'd peered through the cabin window expecting rustlers or worse, he'd found only the horse. But horses didn't saddle themselves, and they sure as hell didn't travel alone through Apache territory. Samuel pulled on his boots, the leather stiff with cold. October in Arizona territory bit deep, especially at this elevation where his ranch clung to the mountainside like a prayer. He'd chosen this isolation for good reason. After what happened in Tombstone, after the badge came off for the last time, he needed distance from anything that breathed. The mare nickered softly as he approached, her dark eyes reflecting starlight. She was beautiful, well-bred, the kind of horse a wealthy man would ride. Her saddle was hand-tooled leather, probably worth more than Samuel's cabin, but it was what hung from the saddle horn that made his blood turn to ice water. A child's doll, porcelain face cracked, golden hair matted with something dark. "Easy, girl," he whispered, his hand trembling as he reached for the reins. The mare didn't shy away. Instead, she pressed her muzzle against his palm, and that's when he felt it, the wetness, blood, still warm. Samuel's eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he saw them, dark stains across the mare's flanks, handprints, small ones. His heart hammered against his ribs as he circled the horse, looking for wounds. The mare was uninjured, but the blood wasn't hers. Samuel knew the difference. He'd seen enough violence in his years wearing tin to recognize the signs. Someone had climbed onto this horse bleeding, someone small enough to leave child-sized prints. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of smoke from the valley below, not cook-fire smoke, something else, something that made his gut clench with memories of burned homesteads and unmarked graves. That's when he heard it, a whisper so soft he almost missed it over the wind. "Mister?" Samuel spun toward the sound, his hand instinctively reaching for the colt he no longer wore. The voice had come from behind the mare, but he saw nothing except shadows and fence posts. "Mister, please." There, beneath the horse's belly, a small shape huddled against the animal's legs. Samuel dropped to one knee, squinting into the darkness. A child, a girl no more than 8 or 9, her dress torn and stained. She clutched the mare's leg like it was the only thing keeping her from falling into hell itself. "It's all right," Samuel said, his voice rusty from disuse. "You're safe now." The girl lifted her head, and moonlight caught her face. Dirt and tears had carved clean tracks down her cheeks, but it was her eyes that stopped Samuel cold. They held the kind of emptiness that came after witnessing the unthinkable. "She's just a horse," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's what Mama said, just a horse." But Samuel Hayes had spent enough years tracking killers and thieves to recognize the truth when it stared him in the face. This wasn't just a horse, and this wasn't just a lost child. This was the beginning of something that would force him to choose between the safety of his isolation and the ghosts that had driven him here. The smoke in the valley grew thicker, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Samuel carried the girl into his cabin, her small body limp with exhaustion. She weighed nothing, like a bundle of kindling wrapped in torn calico. He set her on his only chair near the stone fireplace and built up the flames, more for comfort than warmth. "What's your name, child?" "Lucy." Her voice was a broken whisper. "Lucy Carmichael." The name hit him like a fist to the gut. Carmichael. Samuel had heard that name in the territorial capital just 2 months ago. A wealthy rancher from the valley, the kind of man who owned half the territory and wanted the other half. The kind of man who made enemies as easily as he made money. "Where's your family, Lucy?" The girl's eyes went empty again, staring into the fire. "Gone, all gone. Mama said to take Star and ride, said to find help." She looked up at him with those hollow eyes. "Star brought me here. She's smart, isn't she?" "Mama always said Star was the smartest horse in the territory." Samuel knelt beside the chair, studying the blood on the girl's hands and dress. Not her blood, he was certain of that now. Someone else's, someone who'd held her close while they died. "Lucy, who did this? Who hurt your family?" "The masked men. They came at night when Papa was in town." Her voice was matter of fact, The way children spoke about nightmares they'd learned to accept. They had torches. Mama hid me in the root cellar, but I could see through the cracks. Samuel's jaw clenched. He'd seen the aftermath of raids before, both official and otherwise. The territorial wars were far from over, and men like Carmichael often found themselves caught between Apache resistance, Mexican revolutionaries, and simple greed wearing a dozen different masks. A sound outside made them both freeze. Hoofbeats, multiple riders, moving slow and steady up the mountain trail. Samuel's hand went instinctively to his hip, finding only empty leather. His guns were locked in a chest beneath his bed, buried under 3 years of trying to forget what he'd been. "Lucy," he whispered, "I need you to hide. Can you do that for me?" The girl nodded, scrambling toward the back room like a frightened animal. But Samuel was already moving, retrieving the key to his gun chest, his hand steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. Through the window, he counted them. 6 riders, maybe 7, spread out in a line. They wore no uniforms, carried no badges, but moved with the coordination of men who'd worked together before, professional killers, or close enough to it.
Oh.
The lead rider called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Hayes, Samuel Hayes, we know you're in there." Samuel's blood turned cold. They knew his name. In 3 years of isolation, he'd told no one who he really was, what he'd been. Yet here they were, calling him out like they owned him. "We're looking for something that belongs to us," the voice continued. "A horse, a child, both stolen property, you might say." Samuel's hands found his Colt .45, muscle memory checking the cylinder. 6 shots, 7 riders. The arithmetic of violence hadn't changed, even if his appetite for it had. "Send out the girl, Hayes, and we'll call it even. Try to play hero, and we'll burn you out like we did her family." Through the thin cabin walls, Samuel heard Lucy whimper. She'd heard every word, understood exactly what these men had come for, what they'd do to her if they got her back. Samuel Hayes had spent 3 years running from the choices that had ended his career as a lawman, choices that had cost innocent lives, choices that had driven him to this mountain, to this isolation, to this attempt at becoming someone who didn't have to make such decisions anymore. But as he heard Lucy's quiet sobbing from the back room, he realized some choices followed you no matter how far you ran. The riders were spreading out, surrounding the cabin. Samuel checked his gun one more time, and made his decision. The first torch arced through the darkness like a falling star, landing against the cabin's north wall, with a shower of sparks. Samuel had been expecting it. Men like these always led with fire. It gave them control, forced their targets into the open, where bullets could find them easy. "Hayes," the leader's voice cut through the night. "Last chance. Send out the girl, or you burn with her." Samuel crouched beneath the front window, his Colt steady in his grip. The torch outside was catching hold, flames beginning to lick at the dry wood of his cabin walls. He could hear Lucy whimpering in the back room, and the sound carved something raw inside his chest. Through a gap in the curtain, he watched the riders position themselves. They were good, too good to be simple outlaws. These men moved like cavalry, like lawmen, like the kind of professionals who got paid well for making problems disappear. "I count 3 years' pension that says he won't shoot," one of them called out. "Heard he lost his nerve down in Tombstone. Couldn't pull the trigger when it mattered." Samuel's finger tightened on the Colt's trigger. They knew. Somehow they knew about Tombstone, about the child caught in crossfire, about the badge he'd thrown in the dirt after the funeral. They'd done their research, these men. They knew exactly which scars to press. Another torch sailed through the air, this one finding the cabin's wooden roof. The dry shingles caught immediately, and Samuel heard the hungry whisper of spreading flames above his head. The cabin was small, maybe 10 minutes before the fire forced him out, maybe less. "Think about it, Hayes," the leader continued, his voice reasonable, almost friendly. 7 guns against one washed-up lawman with shaky hands. The girl dies either way. Question is whether you die with her. Samuel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the Colt in his hand. 3 years ago, He'd been the fastest drawer in Arizona territory. He'd killed 11 men in the line of duty, each one clean and justified. But the 12th had been a boy, 14 years old, caught between his outlaw father and Samuel's sense of justice. The bullet meant for the father had found the son instead, and Samuel Hayes had died with that boy even though his heart kept beating. Smoke was filling the cabin now, creeping along the ceiling like searching fingers. Lucy coughed from the back room, a small sound that cut through Samuel's memories like a blade. "Mr. Hayes," her voice was small, frightened. "Are they gonna hurt me?" Samuel looked back toward her hiding place, seeing the orange glow of flames reflected on the wall. The fire was spreading faster than he'd hoped. In 5 minutes, maybe less, they'd have to move. "Not if I can help it, Lucy." But even as he said the words, Samuel felt the old doubt creeping in. What if his hand shook when it mattered? What if the fear that had driven him to this mountain still owned him? What if trying to save this girl only got them both killed? Outside, the riders were closing in. Samuel could see their shadows moving between the trees, cutting off escape routes with practiced efficiency. They'd done this before, probably many times, burned out families, silenced witnesses, cleaned up loose ends for whoever paid their wages. The leader's voice came again, closer now. 60 seconds, Hayes, then we come in shooting." Samuel's mind raced through possibilities, each one ending in blood. 7 against 1 was suicide odds, especially with a child to protect. But running meant abandoning Lucy to men who'd already murdered her family, men who'd killed a little girl's mother without hesitation. The ceiling beam above him groaned, weakened by fire. Sparks rained down like deadly snow. Samuel Hayes had spent 3 years trying to forget he'd ever been a lawman, but as he heard Lucy's quiet crying and felt the heat of flames on his face, he remembered something else about that time, something that had nothing to do with fast draws or steady hands. Sometimes doing right wasn't about winning. Sometimes it was just about standing up when everyone else expected you to fall down. The riders were moving in for the kill. "Lucy," Samuel's voice was steady despite the smoke burning his throat. "I need you to come here, child." She emerged from the back room like a ghost, her small hand pressed over her mouth and nose. The firelight caught the tears on her cheeks, but her eyes had lost that empty look. Fear had replaced it, raw, honest fear that somehow seemed healthier than the hollow shock she'd worn before. Samuel knelt beside her, his big hands gentle on her shoulders. "Listen to me careful, Lucy. In about 30 seconds, those men are coming through that door. When they do, I need you to do exactly what I say, when I say it. Can you be brave for me?" Lucy nodded, her chin trembling but determined. "Good girl." Samuel reached into his vest pocket and pulled out something he hadn't touched in 3 years, a small tin star, tarnished now but still carrying weight. "This belonged to me once. It means something, or used to. I want you to hold on to it." Lucy's small fingers closed around the badge. "Were you a sheriff, Mr. Hayes?" "Marshal, a long time ago." Samuel checked his Colt one more time. 6 bullets against 7 men. "I wasn't very good at it. Made some bad choices, hurt people I was trying to protect." "Is that why you live alone?" The simple question hit deeper than any torch or bullet could. Samuel met the girl's eyes, seeing not just fear now but something else, trust. Despite everything, this child was looking at him like he might actually be able to save her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's why." Outside, the riders were getting impatient. Samuel could hear their horses shifting, leather creaking, metal clinking. Professional killers or not, the fire was working against them too. Smoke made for poor visibility, and burning buildings were unpredictable. "But Lucy," Samuel continued, his voice stronger now, "sometimes running away doesn't fix what's broken inside you. Sometimes you have to stand and face it." A burning beam crashed down from the ceiling, sending sparks cascading across the room. The front wall was fully engulfed now, flames reaching hungry fingers toward the door. "Hayes," the leader's voice was closer, maybe 20 feet from the cabin. "Time's up." Samuel stood, positioning himself between Lucy and the door. The heat was becoming unbearable, but he'd faced worse odds with less reason to fight. At least this time, he knew exactly who he was protecting and why. "Lucy, when I tell you to run, you go out the back window and head for the trees. Don't look back, don't wait for me, just run until you find help. What about you?" Samuel smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it felt genuine. "I'll be right behind you, child, that's a promise." But they both knew it was a lie. 7 against 1, with a burning cabin and nowhere to retreat. Samuel Hayes was going to die on this mountain, probably in the next few minutes. The only question was whether he'd take enough of them with him to give Lucy a chance. The girl seemed to understand. She pressed the tin star against her chest like a talisman. "Will you tell me about the horse? About Star? What about her? Mama said she was special, said she could find her way home from anywhere, that she'd always protect family." Lucy's voice was steady now, no longer the broken whisper of a traumatized child. "She brought me here to you. Maybe that means something." Samuel felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames surrounding them. For 3 years, he'd been running from his failures, hiding from the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. But maybe Lucy was right. Maybe that mare hadn't brought her here by accident. Maybe some things were worth standing for, even if you fell. The front door exploded inward, kicked off its hinges by a heavy boot. Through the smoke and flames, Samuel saw the outline of the first gunman, his weapon already drawn. "Now Lucy," Samuel shouted, "run!" But as the girl dove toward the back window, Samuel Hayes did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He stepped forward instead of back, his Colt rising with practiced speed, his hand steady as granite. The old marshal was back. The first gunman never saw it coming. Samuel's bullet took him center mass, spinning him around and back through the burning doorway. The second man got his gun halfway up, before Samuel's second shot ended his career permanently. "Jesus Christ!" someone shouted from outside. He still got it. But Samuel was already moving, diving behind his overturned table as return fire splintered the wood around him. 4 shots left, 5 men still breathing. The arithmetic of violence was still working against him, but something had changed. His hands weren't shaking, his aim was true. For the first time in 3 years, Samuel Hayes felt like himself again. Through the smoke he heard Lucy crash through the back window. Good, she was out, away from the immediate danger. That was what mattered. "Spread out," the leader called. "Take him from 3 sides." Samuel smiled grimly. These men had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed he was still the broken lawman who'd walked away from his badge. They hadn't counted on what protecting an innocent child could do to a man's courage. A figure appeared at the side window, rifle raised. Samuel put a bullet through the glass and the man behind it. 3 shots left, 4 men standing. "Son of a bitch knows what he's doing," one of them muttered. "Doesn't matter," the leader replied. "Buildings coming down around him. Fire'll do our work for us." The leader was right. The cabin was collapsing, the roof sagging dangerously as support beams burned through. Samuel had maybe 2 minutes before the whole structure came down, but sometimes 2 minutes was enough. He heard movement at the back of the cabin. Someone had seen Lucy's escape route, and was circling around. Samuel cursed under his breath. If they caught the girl now, everything he'd done would be worthless. That's when he heard it. Hoofbeats, but not approaching, departing. Fast. Through a gap in the burning wall, Samuel caught a glimpse of silver coat gleaming in the Star, the mare Lucy's mother had called the smartest horse in the territory, and on her back, barely visible in the smoke and darkness, a small figure clinging to the saddle. Lucy had found her horse. More than that, the horse had found her. "The girl," someone shouted. "She's getting away." 2 of the remaining gunmen broke from their positions, racing toward their horses to give chase. That left Samuel facing 2 instead of 4, better odds, but still not good enough with only 3 bullets remaining. The cabin's main support beam groaned ominously. 30 seconds, maybe less, before the whole thing came down. Samuel made his choice. Instead of waiting for the building to collapse around him, he kicked open what was left of the front door and stepped out into the night, his Colt steady in his hand. The leader and his last companion were caught off guard by Samuel's sudden appearance. They'd expected a trapped rat, not a man walking calmly into the open with death in his eyes. "You made a mistake," Samuel said, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "You should have learned more about Tombstone before you came here." "Yeah?" The leader's hand hovered over his gun. "What about Tombstone? I didn't lose my nerve there. I found my conscience." Samuel's Colt came up smooth as silk. "There's a difference." Both men went for their guns at the same time. Samuel was faster. 2 shots, fired so close together they sounded like one. Both gunmen dropped where they stood, their weapons unfired. Samuel's last bullet went into the burning cabin's wall, because sometimes you had to make a statement about what you stood for. Behind him, the cabin collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber. 3 years of isolation, 3 years of running from responsibility, gone up in smoke. But Samuel Hayes felt lighter than he had since that boy died in Tombstone. The remaining 2 gunmen returned an hour later, empty-handed and nervous. They found Samuel sitting on a fallen log, his empty Colt resting across his knees, watching his cabin burn. "The girl?" one of them asked. "Gone," Samuel replied. "And if you're smart, you'll be gone too before the territorial marshal gets here. I sent word to town with a very reliable messenger." The 2 men looked at their dead companions, then at Samuel's calm face, then at each other. Without another word, they mounted up and rode away into the darkness. Epilogue 6 months later, Marshal Samuel Hayes received a letter addressed to his new office in Prescott. Inside was a photograph of a young girl standing beside a silver mare, her hand resting on the horse's neck. Both looked healthy, happy, alive. On the back, in careful child's handwriting, "Thank you for keeping your promise. Star says hello, Lucy Carmichael." Tucked inside the envelope was something else, a small tin star, polished until it gleamed. Samuel pinned the badge back on his vest, where it belonged. Outside his office window, the territorial sun was setting over mountains that no longer felt like hiding places. Some things he'd learned were worth standing for, even when the odds said you'd fall, especially then. Years later, when Lucy Carmichael became Lucy Carmichael Hayes and took over her family's ranch, she would tell her own children about the night a broken lawman remembered who he was supposed to be. And in the corral behind her house, an old silver mare would lift her head at the sound of that story, as if she remembered too. But that night on the mountain, with fire painting the sky orange and justice finally served, Samuel Hayes simply sat and watched his past burn away, making room for whatever came next. The smartest horse in the territory had brought them both exactly where they needed to be.